Okay, we're going to try this again. We are going to finish reading Freak the Mighty chapters 21 through 25. If you are online and you see these Tuesday, the 15th, please do not ruin it for the traditional students that will not see it until Wednesday, the 16th. And if you are a traditional student who watches it at home tonight, please don't tell everyone else what happens. Okay, so sorry about that shaking. Okay, where we left off, Loretta and Freak ended up rescuing Max from the burned out building that Killer Kane had taken him to. And Freak had sprayed what Killer Kane thought was acid in his eyes, but it was really just vinegar, curry powder, and dish soap, which would still sting. Chapter 21, The Accident of Nature. We all of us had to go down to the police station, of course, where they took a bunch of pictures of the bruises on my neck, and then they insisted I needed x-rays. And so we had to go over to the hospital and then get that done. And then go back to the police station again, which wore on my nerves almost as much as getting kidnapped. Graham, the second time we go to the cops, he's sitting there in this room with me waiting, and he says, I can't tell you what it felt like coming up out of that basement and seeing the double tracks of footprints in the snow. I knew it was him. I just knew it in my heart. He kept insisting that Graham go home, which she finally did, because we were there at the police station for hours more, me telling all about it over and over until I thought I would faint dead away if just one more person asked me what happened after I woke up in the dark and was stolen from my own bed. Graham, he just keeps patting me on the arm and saying, this is important, Max. Maybe this time they'll lock him up for good. That's what everybody keeps saying, that this time they've got Killer Kane where they want him, in violation of parole, in violation of a restraining order, abduction of a minor, and 2 counts of attempted murder. Me and the heroic biker babe, which is what the papers took to calling Loretta Lee. The word is she's hurt pretty bad because he cracked a bone in her neck, but she'll be okay in the long run. Iggy, when I saw him one time in the hospital waiting, he was chewing a hole right through his beard. He was so worried. And it made me think he wasn't such a bad dude after all. It all goes to show, like Grimm says, that you can't always judge a book by its cover. It turns out to be a pretty weird Christmas vacation, as you might imagine. And Graham keeps fussing at me and won't let me sleep in the cellar. I don't care if he is under lock and key, she says. Graham, he says, please humor the woman. She's worried about to death. And so I sleep upstairs on the fold-out, and at night Graham keeps checking to see if I'm there, which is a pain, but she can't help herself. And anyhow, I'm just as glad not to be alone in the down under. Freak, well, the fair Gwen just about threw a fit when she got him home because of him disobeying a direct order and sneaking away to rescue me. But after a while, she calms down, and all she does is just look at him and shakes her head. What am I going to do with you, she asks. Put me up for adoption, he says. I want to go live with the Waltons. The Waltons is a TV show from like the 60s and 70s. It was a family show. It was really good. He means the TV show that keeps repeating. And of course he's teasing her, but the fair Gwen is not amused. No more crazy adventures or dangerous quests, young man. You have to be careful, she keeps saying, extra careful. She means the trouble he has sometimes catching his breath because of the way his insides keep growing faster than his outside, which hasn't really grown at all. Freak goes into the medical research place every few months now, which he says is a real pain, not that it actually hurts. Dr. Spivak says my unique status as a marvel of genetic aberration makes me an object of intense curiosity. He says this in the lofty way. Specialists from the world over are familiar with my case. What about the secret operation, I ask when the fair Gwen can't hear us, the one where you'll get a robot body? Freak gets this very cool scientific look on his face, and he always says the same thing. The bionic research continues, my friend. The work goes on. I don't know why I keep asking because it gives me the creeps. You'd think I could be as cool as Freak about the idea because it's him that's going to get a new bionic body, but just thinking about it makes me want to jump up and run around. I keep telling Graham that when Freak is in the hospital for his tests, I shouldn't have to go to school because we're like a team, but she won't buy it. I know Kevin has been a great help to you, she says, but you've got a brain of your own, haven't you, dear? Yeah, right. The other thing about school that's different after Christmas vacation is how jealous everybody is that we got our pictures in the paper and on the local TV. Mrs. Donnelly in English calls us the dynamic duo. And she put a cutout picture from the paper up on the bulletin board. Wouldn't you know, some goon put mustaches on us the very first day. Freak says he looks cool with a mustache and he can't wait to grow one. And he makes Mrs. Donnelly leave the picture up. Me, I just as soon as forget about the whole thing. I really hate the idea of having to testify at the trial and tell what really happened. But everybody says I have to if I want him locked up for the rest of his life, which I do, especially after what he tried to do to poor Loretta, who was only trying to help. They can't make you if you don't want to, Freak says. A son doesn't have to testify against his father. Grim thinks it will do me good. Plus, he's really worried he'll get off again or fool the jury by quoting from the Bible. Grim worries too much, Freak says. Everybody worries too much. The way it finally turns out with Killer Kane, Freak is right. Because just before the trial is supposed to start, and I've got my fingernails chewed down to the second knuckle, Grim gets this telephone call that makes him punch his fist in the air and go, yes, yes. What happened? They made a deal, and Killer Kane pled guilty, which means he has to serve out the rest of his original sentence plus 10 more years. He'll be an old man when he gets out, Grim says. He'll be older than me. That should make me happy, but instead I feel really weird and worried. And Grim, who still thinks he knows everything, says, I just have to get used to the idea. The man is an accident of nature, he says. All you got from him is your looks and your size. You've got your mother's heart, and that's what counts. The weird thing I keep thinking about, what if something happens when I get older and I turn out to be another accident of nature? Grim sees me thinking about that one night just before bed, and he sits on the end of the fold-out and he says, things will make a lot more sense when you finish growing up, Maxwell. Now sleep tight and don't let the bed bugs bite. Grim means well, I know that, but sometimes he says the numbest things because it's growing up that worries me. Chapter 22. Remembering is just an invention of the mind. Spring has sprung, Freak says, and so are we. This is the day school gets out, and we're taking the long way home. By now, I've been carrying him around on my shoulders for almost a year. We call it walking high, and even if we haven't been going on any dangerous quests lately, so the fair Gwen won't have to throw a fit, Freak hasn't exactly given up on slaying dragons. The world is really and truly green all over, he says. Do you remember what it used to be like back in the Ice Age when the glaciers covered the earth and the saber-toothed tiger roamed the frozen night? No, I say. How could I remember that? I wasn't even born. Don't be a pinhead, he says. Remembering is just an invention of the mind. I go, what's that supposed to mean? It means that if you want to, you can remember anything, whether it happened or not. Like, I can remember what it was like in the Ice Age. I kept trying to invent stuff. The wheel, central heating, indoor plumbing. But the Neanderthals were happy with just a campfire and a fur coat. If you guess that Freak has been reading a book about the Ice Age, you're right. He's been seeing a saber-toothed tiger behind every bush, except that so far, all of them have turned out to be stray cats. Or once it was this skunk. And it's a good thing I can run fast, or we would have had to soak in tomato juice, which is the only way to get rid of the stink. Inventing electricity would be tough, he says, without copper wire and magnets. But I could handle inventing a compass. All you have to do is rub the needle. That way, everybody could head south and get away from the glaciers. First, you need to invent a time machine, I say, so you can go back there and give all the cavemen a hard time about indoor plumbing. Freak goes, you don't need a time machine if you know how to remember, which is something I'll always remember him saying. That and me trying to figure it out. Freak's birthday is a couple of days after school gets out, and the fair Gwen has already made it clear he's not getting to ride on the space shuttle. 13 is supposed to be extra special, he says. The least you could do is get my name on the list, or how about a linear accelerator? Just a small one so I can split a few atoms.
Gilman,
Yes.
how many do you have?
One.
Okay, I'm done.
Okay. Sorry about that, guys. So he wanted his name on the list for the space shuttle. Or how about the linear accelerator, just a small one so I can split a few atoms? The fair Gwen goes, I suppose this means you're going to be an obnoxious teenager. The deal is this is really 2 birthdays for the price of 1 because Freak the Mighty is almost a year old. Talk about a prodigy, Freak says, 1 year old and already he's on his way to 9th grade. The fair Gwen just rolls her eyes when we talk like that. Freak says we can't expect her to understand because you can't really get what it means to be Freak the Mighty unless you are Freak the Mighty. Anyhow, the party is just a family affair because Freak isn't supposed to get overexcited, which is like saying the moon isn't supposed to go around the earth. Last year I got the ornithopter, he says. This year, why not a helicopter? A real one, though. You can't expect a teenager to play with toys. Why not a jet plane, the fair Gwen says. Cool, Freak says. A Learjet? What he's really getting, and I've been sworn to secrecy, is this new computer. The one he's been drooling over in this computer magazines. It comes with a modem, which means if he has to stay home for some reason, he can go to school over the telephone. Yes, that's how we used to do it back in the day before we got internet and fiber optic and all that kind of stuff. It was like a telephone modem for your computer, and it actually dialed in to the computer you wanted to go to. We've come a long way in 30 plus years. The idea is I'd be there in the classroom with a matching computer. The only problem, I don't know squid about computers. You'll learn, the fair Gwen says. Kevin will teach you. But why would he have to stay home, I ask her. We're out in the kitchen and she and Graham are frosting the cakes and Freak is hanging out in the living room acting like he intends to have a party every day for the rest of his life. Maybe he won't have to stay home, the fair Gwen says. And she and Graham kind of lock eyeballs for a second, that secret code that mothers have. This is just in case, Max. I think maybe he already guessed about the computer, I say. That's why he's jerking your chain about the space shuttle ride and Learjets. I'm not surprised, the fair Gwen says. You can't keep anything from Kevin. Freak hardly touches his supper. He says he's saving his appetite for the cake. And finally, we're all done eating except for Grim, who keeps rubbing his belly and rolling his eyes and telling the fair Gwen what a genius she is with fresh peas and new potatoes and salmon, and he'll just have a smidgen more thanks. Until finally Graham clears her throat and smiles, and Grim has to apologize for being such a pig. The funny thing is, when at last they do bring out the cake, Freak asks me to flame out the candles, which means blow them out, while he makes the wish. And then he doesn't even touch his piece. He just sort of pushes it around the plate. I figure he's so excited about getting the new computer that he's lost his appetite. Not that he's letting on he doesn't feel good. He's just acting as wise and smart-mouthed as ever. I should have asked for earplugs, he says when we're done singing. Happy birthday. You better check the glassware for cracks. Hush up, the fair Gwen says, or we'll give you another chorus. When she brings out the computer, he acts so surprised and happy. Maybe he really is surprised. Right away, he wants to turn it on and show off what a brain he is. And because it's his birthday, we all have to sit there and admire him and go, amazing and fantastic. And Kevin, how did you know that? And so on. He's showing Graham how to play 3D chess, and just watching that makes me dizzy. So after a while, I go out to the kitchen and help clean up, which is something I'm good at. Maxwell never breaks a dish, Graham is saying. He's very sure-handed for someone so large. We're almost done putting stuff away and wiping the counter when Grim shouts from the other room. All he says is, Kevin! But we can tell right away that something is wrong. We run in and Freak is leaning back in a chair, making this wheezing sound, panting real fast, and his eyelids are flickering. He's having a seizure, Grim says. Call an ambulance. The fair Gwen is already on the phone. I run out in the street and start waving my arms and jumping up and down so they'll know where to stop. And I keep running back to the house to check on things. But the fair Gwen says there's nothing we can do except wait. Not really how you'd want to spend your birthday, right? Having a seizure. So, although it's common, things do happen. So, let's see what happens next. Chapter 23, The Empty Book. They won't let me visit him the first day, and Graham says I'll just have to be patient and let the doctors do their business. But I can't stand just sitting around, so I decide to walk over to the hospital, which Grim says is miles and miles, but suit myself. I know how to get there because Freak and I went yonder that way once so he could show me the medical research building. It's not the same, though, without Freak along to turn the houses into castles and the swimming pools into moats. All I keep thinking is what a jip it is to have to go to the hospital on your birthday. Finally, I get there and I see the Fair Gwen's car in the visitor parking lot. But Grim says I should leave her alone and let her tend to her son. So what I do is go around back to the medical research building and find this stupid little tree I can sit under. I have that old ornithopter bird with me, and I'm winding it up and flying it around, figuring maybe Freak would get the chance to look out the window and see it flittering by. That's my plan. And I'm under that puny little tree messing with the bird until this guy mowing the lawn makes me move. So I wander around to the front of the hospital, and that's when the Fair Gwen finds me. "Maxwell," she says, and she gives me this great big hug. A wet hug because she's been crying. "Max, we've been looking all over for you. Kevin wants to see you. He's making quite a fuss about it, and Dr. Spivak says it's okay, but just for a few minutes." So the Fair Gwen takes me inside, and I figure we're heading for the medical research building. But instead, we go into the regular hospital. "He's in the ICU," she says. "So they're taking really good care of him?" "They're doing their best, Max," she says. The intensive care unit is this place where there are so many nurses you can't hardly turn around without bumping into one, which I do as soon as we get there. Every patient gets a room alone, and there's all this electronic gear the Fair Gwen says is called telemetry, which means when Freak sneezes, the nurses know about it before he can wipe his nose. I'm not scared at all until I actually go into his room and see how small he looks on the bed. They've got him sitting up with all these tubes going into his arms and up his nose, and Dr. Spivak is guarding him. She won't let me come too close. "I thought no visitors was the best policy for now," Dr. Spivak says, "but what Kevin wants, Kevin gets." Dr. Spivak is a small woman with short red hair and a real stern face, and it's like she's mad because Freak wants to see me, or because I'll break some of her precious equipment. "That will be all," Freak says to her. "You are dismissed." The thing is, his voice sounds funny, not just faint and weak, but kind of whistly. Only when I get closer do I see he's got this weird little plastic button stuck in his neck. "It's called a tracheotomy," he says, holding his finger against the button, which stops the whistling noise. "Standard procedure to facilitate breathing." "Does it hurt?" "No way," he says. "I think it's cool. Listen to this." Then he plays with his finger against the button, but making his throat whistle a tune, which he says is the theme from Star Trek, although you can hardly recognize it. "So when do you come home?" I ask. Freak can't move much the way they've got him set up in the bed, so he sort of shakes his eyes instead of his head. "I'm not coming home," he says. "Not in my present manifestation." I go, "What?" "The bionic unit is on red alert," he says. "Tonight they'll take me down there for my special operation. The next time you see me, I'll be new and improved." "I'm scared," I say. "Don't be a moron," he says. "You're not the one having surgery." I still wish they wouldn't. "Don't argue with me," he says. I have to lean close to hear him because his voice is so small and whispery. He goes, "If you argue with me, I'll get upset, and they can tell on the telemetry, then you'll get in trouble." So I just stand there like a lump and don't say anything for a while. I put the ornithopter on the foot of the bed, but I don't think he notices. "See the book on the table?" he asks. He can't point, but I see the book on the table. "Open it," he says. The book reminds me of the dictionary he gave me for Christmas, except when I open it, all the pages are blank. "That's for you," he says. "I want you to fill it up with our adventures." "Huh?" "Write it down, dummy." I was going to do it, but now it looks like I'll be busy getting used to my new bionic body. It'll probably take me weeks just learning how to walk with long legs. I put the book down. "You're the one with the brain," I say. "I'm the long legs. Don't get me upset," he warns. "I won't have the time, so you'll just have to do it. Just write it all down like you're talking. Put in all the fun we had, the cool things we did, our adventures." "But you know I can't write, Kevin." "It's all in your head, Max. Everything you can remember. Just tell the story of Freak the Mighty. No big deal." This part gets me every time. I pick the book back up, but I don't say anything more about how hopeless it is, me trying to write stuff down, because I don't want to set off the telemetry. He does that himself about a minute later when he starts to cough. And before I can say anything, the room is swarming with nurses, and Dr. Spivak is telling me I have to leave. Out this second, young man, and let us do our jobs. They let me wait outside the ICU with the fair Gwen, who was just standing there at the window, wringing her hands and not saying anything. And then finally they come out and say, he's okay. It was just a bad spell, that they have him stabilized. A while later, Graham comes into the hospital and she drives me home. Nobody talks much at supper that night, except when Graham opens his big mouth and says, poor Gwen looks like she's in terrible pain. I go, poor Gwen? She's not the one having the special operation. Graham and Graham just look at each other like they can't believe I'm so dumb. And finally, Graham says, Maxwell, dear, make an effort to eat your vegetables. That night, I put the empty book in the pyramid box for safekeeping and for good luck. I always thought that part was so sweet when he gave him the empty book and is encouraging him to write and telling him he can do it. It's just like talking. It always gets me. Chapter 24, The Return of Kicker. The deal is, I'm not supposed to bother anybody at the hospital. Yeah, right. Like me being there is going to screw things up. The way everybody is acting around here, you're supposed to shut up and not do anything but wait, which makes me crazy. So early the next morning, when Grim is still snoring loud enough to rattle the window panes, I get up and sneak out of the house. The way I figure I can check on Freak and be back in time for breakfast. No harm done. It doesn't work out like that, to say the least. The sun is just coming over the mill pond, and there's a spooky mist on the water. You can hear all the frogs making a racket under the lily pads, and the mosquitoes sound like bullets whizzing by. And I have to kind of slap and run until I get clear of that smelly old pond. Moving fast like the sun is chasing my heels, I'm running down this long, faint shadow of me that stretches out ahead. You can't ever catch up with it. I'm thinking with my feet, like the rest of me is still asleep. Not that I'm completely alone. There's this one old guy, he's actually out cutting his lawn. He's got these headlights rigged up on his rider mower, and he's wearing pajamas too, like it's normal. Everybody does it. When I get to the hospital, the street lights are just starting to click off. The lobby is empty, and there's nobody at the desk to tell me I can't be visiting patients at the crack of dawn. There are plenty of nurses in the ICU, though, and they see me coming. This one woman runs right out from behind the telemetry station, and she's got her hands up to her mouth, and I'm pretty sure she's trying to shush me, even though I'm not making any noise. She's not telling me to be quiet, though. She's saying, oh my God, you must be Maxwell, even though she's never seen me before in her life. I go, is Kevin back yet? Oh dear, she says. Is he going to be okay? Oh dear, she says. Oh dear. Now, more nurses are coming out of the ICU. One of them is the one I accidentally bumped into yesterday. And when she sees me, she goes, better page Dr. Spivak. Kevin was her patient. That's when I notice that some of the nurses are crying and looking at me strange. And all of a sudden, I just go nuts. Just go nuts. I'm saying, no way, no way. And this nurse is trying to throw a hug on me, and I push her away. Then I'm running down the hall, and it's like I'm Kicker again, ready to just blast anybody who dares touch me. And I had to keep running. I'm skidding around the corners and bumping into walls, and no one can touch me, even if they're brave enough to try. I just keep running and running until I get to these glass doors that say medical research. The doors are locked and it's dark inside. Behind me, people are shouting to call the guards, and I punch my hand right through the glass, and I'm inside skidding over broken glass through the dark. And I keep going until I come to this other set of doors. No admittance. No glass this time. They're solid, so I can't punch through. And I'm kicking and slamming into the doors, and that's when all the hospital cops catch up with me. A bunch of them jump on me, and I keep going, running around in circles like an accident of nature, until finally there are so many of them on me, I can't stand up anymore. They're putting handcuffs on my wrists and my ankles, and they're sitting on me and going, we'll have to medicate him. And this one cop says, with what, an elephant gun? That's how Dr. Spivak finds me, covered with cops. She's this worried face leaning down. Her eyes are red and blurry, and she's saying, I'm sorry, Maxwell. We did our best. Better let me bandage up that hand. You're bleeding. He believed you, I say. You said you could give him a new body, and he believed you. What are you talking about? The special operation, I say, the bionics unit. Dr. Spivak makes the cops let me up and says she'll be responsible, but they leave the handcuffs on me just in case. And the cop who was talking about needing an elephant gun has his nightstick out, and he's ready to bop me if I make a move. Dr. Spivak sighs and says, somebody get me a coffee, please. And then she looks at me and goes, you better tell me all about it. So while she's bandaging up my hand, I tell her about how Freak has been coming to the medical research lab every few months to get fitted for his new bionic body. And Dr. Spivak's face goes soft, and she nods to herself and says, well, that explains it. It was all a lie, wasn't it, I say. You were just telling him that so he wouldn't be scared. You know better than that, Maxwell. You couldn't lie to Kevin. I tried a little fib on him when he was about 7 years old because I didn't think a child could handle the whole truth. And you know what he did? He looked his disease up in a medical dictionary. That's when I know she's telling the truth. Freak in his dictionary. Kevin knew from a very young age that he wasn't going to have a very long life, she says. He knew it was just a matter of time. So he was lying about getting a robot body? Dr. Spivak is shaking her head. I don't think it was a lie, Maxwell, do you? I think he needed something to hope for, and so he invented this rather remarkable fantasy you describe. Everybody needs something to hope for. Don't call it a lie. Kevin wasn't a liar. No, I say, but what happened to him, really? I could tell you all the medical terminology, she says, but what finally happened is his heart just got too big for his body. There was talk about arresting me for busting up the hospital. The cop with the nightstick was in favor, but finally they released me into the custody of Grimm. On the way home, he goes, do you want to talk about it? Just leave me alone, I say. You got it, he says. Chapter 25, What Loretta Said. That was a year ago. I hid in the down under for days and days and kept the door closed, which is why I missed the funeral and the fair Gwen going away. Graham told me about it afterwards, how she couldn't stand to live in the house with Kevin gone, and who could blame her? Graham threatened to unscrew my bedroom door, but he never did. He just kept saying I should come out for Graham's sake, and sometimes she'd come down and say I should come out for Graham's sake, and so on and so forth, until finally I gave up and came out. I don't know if this makes sense, but for a long time I felt like I was a balloon, and somebody had let the air out of me. I didn't care if I ever got the air back, because what does it really matter if we're all going to die in the end? That's how down I was feeling and sorry for myself. Graham tried to tell me it isn't how long you've got that matters. It's what you do with the time you have. But that sounded so lame and puny next to Freak dying that I just didn't want to hear it. This one day, just before school was supposed to start, I was moping around the backyard and thinking again how pointless and stupid everything was. And Grim comes over to me and says, you know what? Most of us go all the way through life and we never have a friend like Kevin. So maybe you should count yourself lucky. Yeah, right, I say. Suit yourself, he says. But let's get one thing straight. You're going back to school. If I have to hitch a rope to the bumper and drag you there, is that clear? So I went, and I hated every minute of it. And I especially hated how people kept feeling sorry for me, as if it were me who died. Finally, one time, even Tony D came up to me and said it was a shame what happened. And I could see that he really meant it. And I just blew up and told him if he ever felt sorry for me again, I'd put him headfirst in the milk pond and pound him down into the mud like a fence post. So we're enemies again, which is just the way I like it. Not too long after that, this was winter by then, I saw Loretta Lee in the street. She still had on a neck brace, and you could smell booze on her breath. But what do you expect? A miracle just because she lost her head and acted good for a couple of minutes? Anyhow, Loretta sees me and she says, "Did you hear about Gwen? She's in California and she's got a new boyfriend. His name is Rick and they're crazy about each other. Ain't that good news?" "I guess so." "Take it from me," she says. "It is." "So what are you doing these days?" "Nothing." She gives me this long look and she goes, "Nothing's a drag, kid. Think about it." I thought about it all the way home. That night I pulled the pyramid box from under the bed and got the empty book out of the pyramid, and I'm thinking, who are you kidding, Maxwell Kane? You haven't got a brain. And that's the truth, the whole truth. The unvanquished truth is how Freak would say it. So I wrote the unvanquished truth stuff down and then kept on going for months and months until it was spring again. And the world was really and truly green all over. By the time we got here, which I guess should be the end, I'm feeling okay about remembering things. And now that I've written a book, who knows? I might even read a few. No big deal. That's the end. I know it kind of got sad there for a little bit, but it's one of my favorite books. So I want you guys to take the AR test. I will post on Google Classroom in the morning the address, the URL address for Renaissance Accelerator Reader. And this will be a grade in the grade book. Now, those of you that have had trouble getting to the earlier chapters, if you will make sure you log in to YouTube, go to my channel and hit play all, it'll be the newest videos right in a row. Just scroll down till you see those earlier chapters. So have a great evening. Have a great Wednesday. And I'll see you guys soon. Oh, we'll be reading Max the Mighty next. Bye.